Hello and welcome to the podcast that won't try and shoehorn 10 playmakers into your starting 11, but would much rather build it around a 6-foot target man. It's the big man up top.
It's the big man up top, yes.
I'm Joe.
And I'm Ed. How are you doing, Joe?
I'm good. That was a little nod to Thursday night's lineup. We will come on to England, of course.
Yeah, exactly. It was problematic, wasn't it?
It was. Ed, you've just enlightened me about your Saturday just before we started recording.
Yes.
Tell me what you got up to.
Well, basically, we had one of those rare weekends where there was nothing planned on the Saturday, and we decided to keep it that way.
International break,
nothing going on. We got up late, we stayed in our pyjamas, we all had breakfast together, and then I spent a good chunk of the day playing with my kids building Lego football stadiums.
That's really quite special, isn't it?
They wanted to do princess castles.
You said no.
I said no. I want a football stadium with corporate entrances and a section for the ultras and floodlights and the works.
Love that.
So we're going to chat about a few bits and bobs. First of all, it's only right that we touch on the sad passing of George Baldock.
There's obviously really sad news, devastating news. Really well loved in England and in Sheffield in particular. I think that was something that struck me, is that he's not from Sheffield, but he was a big part of Sheffield United's team, and he was just so loved there. Some really lovely tributes to him from Sheffield and from Greece during the game. You know, they dedicated their win to him. They held up a shirt when they scored, and I thought that was a really nice touch. Really touching,
and obviously it's a really sad story, and you know he leaves behind a young family, and obviously our thoughts and prayers go out to his family and his loved ones. Interestingly, that actually brings us on to quite a serious point, in that the Greek FA asked UEFA to postpone that game, didn't they? Yeah.
Obviously, George was a teammate to many of these players. You know, he had 12 appearances for Greece during his career, so he's well loved by the team, and rightly so. The Greek FA requested that this game was postponed. You know, it's the day after the news broke, and the response they got from UEFA was that they couldn't do that because there wasn't enough room in the calendar.
UEFA are in a really difficult position here, but at the same time, it was a Nations League game, which, as we sort of jokingly referred to it as a glorified friendly, but that's essentially what it is. And you do feel like maybe there could have been a way they could have worked this out.
And obviously, we don't want to detract from what a sad situation this is, but there's a whole thing to be said about the welfare of players, not just physical welfare, but the mental welfare of players. This is a day after one of their close friends has tragically passed away.
Yeah.
And we don't know what conversations have gone on, but it seems that there has been no room for these players to grieve almost.
Yeah. And I think that is a serious conversation, and there's been some managers that have been sort of sounding the alarm for a while now, and it feels like it's going to reach tipping point at some point, I reckon, in the next sort of year or so.
I think it has to. I think something has to change.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's start with the Nations League and England and Lee Carsley and all of that sort of stuff. Should we start with the Greece game?
I do feel like both these England games have been kind of polar opposites.
Yeah.
You know, there's been a lot of commentary on, does Lee Carsley want the England job? You know, he kind of hinted in his post-match on Thursday, hopefully I'll go back to the under-21s team.
Well, he managed England on Thursday like he didn't want the job.
in a way that said that he doesn't want the job at all. But I do think, you know, when you saw that lineup come out on Thursday, I don't know if there's many England fans that hated it, you know?
Quite clearly, this is what fans have been clamouring for, and Southgate was always so cautious, and he just threw caution to the wind, and it just backfired spectacularly.
It didn't work at all. You know, there's probably one player in the whole starting 11 that wasn't attacking minded, and that was Levi Colwill. Even three of the back four were, it was Alexander Arnold, it was John Stones, it was Rico Lewis, all very forward thinking players. Declan Rice was obviously in the midfield and is often asked a lot of, and I think it just showed in this game that that's not the way to do it, is it?
No, maybe not. And then following that, the game against Finland.
Very different.
Very, very different. Tell us a bit about that game.
Well, yeah, a much more balanced lineup.
You sent me a text, didn't you, Joe, asking if I was watching the England-Finland game.
I did, yeah.
And I wasn't. But I
Why ever not?
Well, I was in the middle of doing something else, building Lego stadiums, apparently. And what I did do was I had a quick look on BBC Sport, and I'd seen the headline, Henderson starts for England.
Something we've all feared over the last 4 years.
And I assumed that Jordan Henderson had another call-up. And I just thought, Lee Carsley really is trying to throw this here. But no, it was talking about Dean Henderson in goal. But a really interesting game. Can we talk a little bit about Angel Gomez?
Please do, yeah.
How do you think he did? Because he looked really lively, I think.
He's looked very good. Plays for Lille. I think he used to be at Manchester United, and they've let go of him, of course. So they'll sign him for £100 million next summer.
Yep,
in the style of Paul Pogba. But yeah, really tidy player. Good on the ball, good at reading the play. Interceptions are a big part of his game. But yeah, it looks really good. The moment I text you, though, Ed, the commentator just described the colour of the England kit.
Oh, right.
And I just wanted a conversation with you at the time of what you think it means. He described it as deep raisin.
Oh,
what does that mean?
Well, it's certainly not whatever that is. I think Deep Raisin sounds like a Deep Purple tribute band.
It does, doesn't it? I just wonder, do these commentators have a Dulux colour chart like on their desk, and they're just, which is the closest? Deep raisin.
Yeah,
because it does sound like something you'd paint your room with.
Yeah, just something that you buy, you try it, and think, no, never.
What's different here?
Yeah, I'm not having that. Just stick with the regular colours, please, kit designers.
Yeah.
That's what we all want. So, Joe, you messaged me the other day to talk about your controversial opinion of the week.
Yeah, it's interesting that I looked on the running order and it said Joe's controversial opinion of the week. Does that mean I'm allowed one every week?
You can have one every week if you want.
Yeah, I think I said to you, and this isn't just to wind up any Arsenal fans listening. I said
Although there's a bit of that going on.
There's a bit of that, yeah. I said to you that Bukayo Saka reminds me a bit of Danny Welbeck.
In what way?
I'm not going as far to say as he's the next Danny Welbeck. Look, I love Danny Welbeck. I think he's a great player. I just think Bukayo Saka is prone to injury in a similar way that Danny Welbeck was. My train of thought here was that, thinking about fixture congestion, Bukayo Saka plays a lot of football.
Yeah.
He's a very young player, and for someone that young,
he's relied on really heavily.
He is, and I do think if he plays this much football, he's going to get more and more injured, and the potential he has is not going to be realised because of how much football he's playing. I think this was part of a wider conversation I wanted to have about fixture congestion, which we've already touched upon, but more and more players are coming out speaking about how much football they play, and then weirdly, like soon after it, they're getting a season-ending injury.
Yeah.
So it's happened to Rodri at Man City. It's happened to Dani Carvajal at Real Madrid. These players have all come out and said how much they are concerned about how much football they are playing. And that was my thought with Saka, is that he's such a talented player, but he's playing every minute of Arsenal games, and I do just fear that he's not being looked after.
You only have to look at the creation of the Club World Cup by FIFA.
Yeah, I think this has been the real tipping point of this conversation.
That is not going to be a full-strength side that goes out and plays in those games, not from the likes of City. And so I think that, you're then starting to talk about, well, more and more keeps getting added. For me, it devalues the actual product. I got sick of football this summer.
Yeah.
Because we saw football in the Olympics, we saw the Euros as well, and we were straight back into the Premier League season.
I totally agree. I think this is the first season where I've felt, actually, and I love football, I could watch it every week.
So could I. Hence why we're doing this show.
I do watch it every week. But this is the first season that I can remember where I've been like, actually, I'm not ready for this season to start again, because there's so much product to watch. You just don't enjoy it as much because there's so much of it.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing, is there's got to be a real serious conversation about this. But controversial opinion, Saka, the next Danny Welbeck.
Yeah.
I wonder what Bukayo would think of that. Should we get him on?
Maybe not.
Maybe not. We, of course, would have Bukayo Saka on this podcast anytime.
I don't mean it.
Another piece of news in the last week has been Jurgen Klopp signing an agreement to join Red Bull.
Yes, he has. This has been quite a big story the last week. He's on a lot of money, Ed.
A lot of money.
Yes, he's just become Red Bull's head of global... Have they called it soccer?
I don't know.
I think it's head of global soccer.
I think obviously there's been quite a lot of condemnation in Germany and across the football world about this. What was the sort of reputation of Jurgen? Because I feel like anybody could have taken this job, but it was not. We just didn't want him to take it, did we?
I think Jurgen Klopp has this real ability to connect with a place.
Yeah.
When he was manager of Mainz, he really loved the place, he loved the club, and he was well loved there. Same with Dortmund. You know, he was absolutely adored at Dortmund as a real man of the people. And the same as Liverpool. The whole chat around Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool is that he gets it. He gets the club. It's such a cliche, but he really did. He got the people, and he got... he understood what it meant to be manager of that team and how important that is to the fans. So I think that's why this has gone down particularly badly in Germany with Dortmund.
RB Leipzig are universally hated in Germany, and much more than, for example, like Manchester United are universally hated.
Yeah, 100%.
So for anyone who doesn't know their story, I would say they're sort of the equivalent of an American expansion team. So how the Americans like to just sort of just create teams out of nothing. That's exactly what Red Bull did. RB Leipzig are very much seen as anti-football, plastic football, all that sort of stuff. And for Jurgen Klopp to go there very much smacks of just he's gone to where the money is. Yeah. And I think people expected better of him, Joe.
It's Jurgen, isn't it? I think this is something that German fans are actually very good at. They're very good at standing up for what they believe in. And I think it's something we could learn a lot from as English fans. I feel like if a nation state was to buy out, I don't know, like Bayern Munich or any German club, I feel like their fans would have a lot to say about it.
They wouldn't put up with it like we have.
They wouldn't at all.
So, I mean, obviously this is going to be something that sort of, rumbles on.
Yeah.
I suspect this is just a stopgap for him to the Germany national team job.
Yeah, because there's a clause in his contract, isn't there, that he is allowed to leave for the German national team.
That's what he wants.
Which says a lot. It says that is the job he wants.
And we've reached the time of the show, Joseph.
Yes, time to shine.
Time to shine. Yeah, well, I'm calling it Bible Ballers.
Okay, then why is that, Ed?
Because that's the name of our quiz.
Oh, yes.
Yes, so this is Guess the Player with a Difference. So I'm going to be quizzing Joe this week. I will be asking him a Guess the Player question. The difference is the first name of this player will also be the same as the name of a book of the Bible. How are you feeling? Are you feeling excited? Or?
Yeah, no, I'm slightly worried, Ed.
Why?
Obviously, I'm doing very well in this quiz.
You're 4-2 up.
Yeah, I just worried that you're going to make the questions harder.
I absolutely am.
And I don't think that's right. You don't see on The Chase, someone's doing really well. They don't make it harder, do they?
Yeah, but look, I'm a golfer, and I'm a big fan of the handicap system, Joe.
Well,
so,
I'll take it as a compliment.
Okay. So, are you ready?
Yes.
Which big man up top played for Bournemouth, Burnley and Stoke, amongst others, and has scored 11 goals for his country, including one at a European Championships quarter-final? Any thoughts?
I'm thinking a European Championship quarter-final. Wales famously got there.
They did.
A tall Wales striker feels like they'll have played for Stoke, Burnley and Bournemouth. Welsh strikers, you've got John Hartson. I don't know if he played for them clubs. Kiefer Moore. There isn't a book of Kiefer.
No, but all these sound like they could have played for Stoke.
They do. Yeah, I'm going to need a bit more time on this.
You can have some more time. We'll come back to this at the very end of the episode, and then I will have you lock your answer in.
Thank you very much.
So this week I've got a bit of a treat for you, Joe.
Oh, do you?
I do, yes. So I was very, very privileged to have a conversation with Bruce Dyer the other day.
Yes.
Former Premier League striker.
Yeah.
He was the first ever million teenager when he signed for Crystal Palace in 1994.
Well, that's quite special, isn't it?
Isn't that cool?
No one can ever take that away from him.
No one can ever take that away from him. And basically, he's got an amazing story about his career, the goals he scored. He scored many. He was a big man up top.
He was.
You know, he was big, powerful, quick, strong. He has had an incredible journey, and Jesus has had a profound impact on his life, and he came to faith in the middle of his career. So I asked him all about that and what he's getting up to these days. Joining me today is Bruce Dyer, former Premier League striker and now pastor of Love Life Church. How are you doing today, Pastor Bruce?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. Thank you very much.
You began your career at Watford, and in 1994, you became the first £1 million teenager when you signed for Crystal Palace. Will you start by telling us about the early days of your career and how you got into the game?
I tell people this story. You know, when I was 15, I was actually going to stop playing football. And I use a Bible verse that, you know, whether people have faith or not, you can't argue with it, that bad company corrupts good habits. You know, I believe what you look at, what you listen to, what you surround yourself around is going to influence your life in a positive and negative way. And so I was kind of went off the rails a little bit when I was younger, but I had a really good coach in Kenny Jackett, who invested a lot of time. They offered me a scholarship at Watford, but the deal for me to get my scholarship at Watford would be that I'd have to leave East London and move into Diggs, move in with another family, just to kind of get me focused. I went on tour with the first team in pre-season, came back, player got injured, and I know it was Kenny Jackett that said, you know, give Bruce a chance. Played a couple of games, scored on my debut, played 33 consecutive games. Then all of a sudden, there was a lot of speculation around me as a young kid. We played Birmingham City, and Barry Fry was the manager at the time, and we beat them. And Barry Fry made a statement in the News of the World and said, if I had £1 million, I'd sign the boy Dyer. And obviously then I went on to be sold for £1 million. And it was unbelievable, because all I ever wanted to do was to be a professional football player. I love football, and so to be sold for that amount of money and to be the first teenager in history to be sold for that amount. Many of our, like the younger generation, they would understand Roy the Rovers, but that was like Roy the Rovers stuff, like the big dream. Do you know what I mean? So it was fantastic.
And how did that sort of affect you at the time? You know, with the price tag and all of that, I imagine some players at that age, that would put them under quite a lot of pressure. And then yet others at that age would just make them thrive under that.
Yeah, for me, it weren't pressure, because I weren't playing football because of money. I loved football. I loved scoring goals. The price tag I didn't even think about. All I was thinking about when I signed for Crystal Palace at the time, they were top of what would be like the Championship now. It was odds on favourite they were going to get promoted. So all I was thinking about was like, oh my gosh, this time next year, I could be in the Premier League. Like, oh man, this is a dream. Like, I watch a match of the day, and I could be on it. And so that was my thought process, and that's what happened. And so, thank God, it weren't really the pressure. I actually really enjoyed the moment.
But also, that was around the time that you were exploring your faith journey as well. So tell us a little bit about your faith journey.
I grew up in church, and so my mum's been a Christian from the age of 15, and my dad had a faith, my uncle and my grandma, you know, they were ministers in the church, and so I grew up around faith. I had a knowledge of Jesus, but there's a difference in having a knowledge than having revelation and insight where he becomes a real reality to you. And so I had a lot of information, a lot of knowledge that I believed in, respected. My parents respected church. And deep down in my heart, really, I always knew that I was going to end up back in church, because, you know, the Bible says, train up a child in the way that they should go, that when they grow old, they'll not depart from it. And, you know, my parents trained and they brought us up in that way. And so I tell people this, and this is just the truth. Even when I was like at my wildest, I would always come home, even after a night out, being absolutely hammered. I would say my prayers and I would say, Lord, I know I'm not living right, but just remember me. And I really did. I really honestly used to do that. You know, my mum, we laugh about it now. My mum used to say, sometimes I used to think, son, you were just such a lost soul. You were just so far from Jesus. But she never stopped praying for me. But what my mum didn't know is that she taught us how to pray as kids. And before I used to go to bed, I used to always pray. And a real defining moment for me was in 1998. As a footballer, you get 6 weeks off in the holiday. Once a season finishes, you get probably 5 or 6 weeks off. And for me, once the season finished, it was like finished party time. Like I would just be like, right, I'm going for it. I'd go out everywhere. But that particular summer, I mean, I was going out on a Thursday to Sunday for probably 3 or 4 weeks on the bounce. And I was abusing my body. I was just living so not right. But I hit a brick wall. I can't explain it apart from it's like I hit a brick wall. I slid down it and I couldn't get back up. I started to have mental health problems. I was so depressed. I felt so down. And I'm convinced that was because of the alcohol abuse, the way I was abusing my body, how I was living, the sleepless nights, and all of this crazy things that I entangled myself in, that I just like mentally hit a brick wall and I couldn't get up. And I remember I had an older brother who became a Christian in prison. And the transformation in his life was nothing short of a miracle. And I saw firsthand the power of Jesus turning someone from darkness into light. And I remember my brother calling me when I was in a really dark place. And I remember just putting down the phone and all I could think of was Jesus. And it was at that moment that those Bible stories as a kid, it's like they came flashing in my mind. And then I just knew in my heart that there's two ways here. This is going to get darker or there's a way out with Jesus. And I sat on my bed in 1998. I didn't scream, shout. I didn't quote loads of Bible verses, but just from my heart, I said, Lord, help me. I need help. And I cannot explain it apart from whenever I share this story, the one Bible verse that always comes to my mind is where it says in 2 Corinthians, where it says, if anybody is in Christ, they're a new creation. And it says old things have passed away and all things became new. And I tell you, I turned from the ugly monster into the prince. Like something supernatural happened on the inside of me that I have never been the same to this day. And that's when my journey began.
Did you have any teammates who had a faith or anything like that? Anybody inside the game you could turn to at that point?
No, that I'm, so my personality, right? I'm all or nothing. Like when I'm in something, I'm in it. And so, by the grace of God, it's like when I was partying, it's like I was a front line. I was a leader of the pack. And so I was wild. I was full on. I always knew in my heart I would go back to church. I didn't know how, but I just knew that was my roots. When I became a Christian, I walked straight into the dressing room at Palace. And I said to all the lads, I've become a born-again Christian. And everyone started laughing. I mean, everyone, it's like, if to say, like, last week we was out doing some crazy things and you're telling me about Jesus, are you mad? And they all laughed and they, some was like, we'll give him a month, mate. Month went past, second month. And then I was due to sign for Fulham. So Terry Venables had come in. I'd agreed to sign a contract and then Terry Venables withdrew it. I thought Fulham was the perfect deal. South London. I lived in South London. I had a young son at the time. But the deal fell through. And I never forget when my dad, who was my agent at the time, he phoned me and said, look, Barnsley have come in for you. And I was like, Barnsley? Like, Barnsley? That's at the other end of the world. I was like, Dad, I'm never going up north. It's freezing cold. They talk funny. I'm like, no. And I remember, like, I tell this story all the time. I remember my dad just said to me, son, at least let's have a conversation. So we got on the M1 and honestly, mate, junction 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 20, 30, 35, 37. I'm like, this place is the other end of the world. But as soon as I got to the club and I spoke to the chairman, John Des, I knew in my heart that, you know what, this is where I'm meant to be. And what God did for me was that he took me away from everything, my friends, my family, and he planted me in an environment where basically for a 2-year period, it was just me and Jesus. Like my routine was I used to get up in the morning, pray, read my Bible, have breakfast, go to the gym before training, train, go to the gym after training, go home, sleep. I'd do the same the next day. I did that for 2 years. When I look back now, that was like my wilderness preparation and God just rebuilding my life. And that moment there has probably been some of the best times in my walk with the Lord, just me and Jesus, and it was great. It's just a special place, and then I scored a lot of goals there, and the fans and the community of people in Barnsley have been really good to me, and I loved it. You can't beat that good South Yorkshire air.
We recently had John Baldock on the podcast, and he was talking about how more and more players are beginning to open up about their faith and how it's quite an exciting thing. Do you think that it's becoming more acceptable for players to talk about their faith? And also, do you think we'll see more footballers like yourself going into ministry when they hang up their boots?
100% yes. So in my era, you could count on your hand. There was myself, there was Phil Starbuck doing some stuff with Christians in Sports, Linvoy Primus, Darren Moore. There was just us really in terms that were vocal and out with our faith. And so it was a lonely road back then, and a lot of people used to laugh and mock, where now, man, you go across football clubs in England, there's Christians everywhere. God is definitely doing something in the world of football. There's definitely a move of his spirit. I first met John. This was around, I think, probably 2012 it might have been, when he signed for Sheffield Wednesday. And so back then I used to call him Evangelist John. And now when I see him, I say Pastor John. Do you know what I mean? He's overseeing, he's looking after, he's discipling and training loads of young footballers, and it's phenomenal to see. And they've got footballers all over the world that are Christians, that are connected to ballers in God. And so I believe definitely that it's already happening, but there's so much more to come for sure.
Bruce Dyer, thank you so much for chatting. It's been fascinating to hear your story and get to know you. And yeah, we're just very grateful to have your time on The Big Man Up Top.
No problem. It's a pleasure.
It's such an interesting conversation with him. And I think when I listen back to that, my immediate thought is thinking about why more footballers are coming out and talking about their faith. Is it because of social media? Is it because we know so much more about what's going on behind the scenes? Players have more of a voice on social media. But I don't think that's it. Because I think he spoke about going into that dressing room and saying that he has given his life to Jesus again. And he got laughed at. And he says that these days that won't happen anymore. Do you think there's been a bit of a cultural shift?
I think there has, and I think one of the things that is hugely responsible is that since Bruce was at the peak of his playing days, we've had a huge influx of foreign players, and I think particularly we have a lot more players from Africa, from South America, and I think these are players for whom Christianity is more of a sort of a cultural norm. Maybe a lot more players were raised with Christian beliefs and a Christian faith. And so I think just as we've had more players like that coming into our dressing rooms, they've just been vocal about their faith. And I think that's then just empowered others to either go on a faith journey themselves and find out more, or just players who maybe had a faith but were keeping it to themselves. They felt like they could speak out about it more.
Yeah.
And I think also as well, when you get players come into a club that have a faith, that's when clubs start to say, oh, we need a chaplain here. Sure. And so I think then you've got somebody who's in that club who's responsible for the spiritual growth of the players. And so I think there's lots of reasons, but I think we can all agree, for players of faith, for them to be able to feel comfortable to share about it is a huge plus.
I think you look back over the years on players that have had a faith, and he's right what he was saying. There's such a handful of players. The one I remember the most is Kaká.
Yeah.
That he'd score a goal, he'd lift up his shirt, and he had this T-shirt that said, I belong to Jesus.
Yeah.
But it was almost like left there. I don't know if he spoke out much about his faith. He wasn't necessarily in the English media that much. But fast forward to where we are today, you have so many players coming out. Bukayo Saka, the aforementioned Arsenal legend.
Bukayo Saka, who's been really, really open about his faith, and it's been really, really exciting to see. I know that when Saka went through the awful situation he went through after the 2020 Euros. I'm talking about the abuse he received.
Yeah.
What I do know is that at least he had God with him. At least he knew in the middle of that dark and difficult situation of feeling the weight of his nation on him and the abuse that came with it, that he could turn to God in that situation. And actually that's really lovely. It still doesn't excuse it, but at least he had somewhere to turn.
Exactly. And I think as football fans, we like to feel connected to the players we love. And if we know a footballer has a faith, we immediately feel that connection and you kind of root for them, regardless of which team you support, which teams you don't like as much. You have footballers that come onto a pitch for a substitution and they do the cross sign on them, giving glory to God. But it's much more than that these days. Eberechi Eze, during the Euros, he was quoted saying that Jesus is the centre of his life. And I think for me it comes back to that Romans 1 verse 16, for I'm not ashamed of the gospel. And we're seeing players really living that out. And I think it's such a challenge to us to do that as well.
And especially because, as we've spoken about before, Warren Evans made this point too, is that these players are already under a lot of scrutiny. And so to actually come out and boldly declare to have a faith, I think that is the encouraging thing, is that you just hope, well, they've got God with them. They know they've got somewhere to turn to, and they can turn to God in these situations as well. And maybe other players can turn to them. This reminds me of any workplace environment where you've got somebody of faith who makes it very aware to their colleagues that they are a Christian. And what does that do? Well, hopefully it means that if somebody's got an issue or somebody's got something they want to confide in about whatever it may be, that they know that there's somebody there who has a faith that they can go to. And I think that's the courage that we all need to have.
Yeah.
We work at United Christian Broadcasters. We're surrounded by Christians.
Yeah, I think that's what I was going to say.
We don't need that courage.
No.
But if you're working in the local bank or whatever, you need that courage to be able to handle that really delicately.
Yeah.
But also to have a good influence on people around you.
I think you're so right to say that. I think I see this as a real exciting moment and a real encouragement. If that can shift in football like that, how can that shift in your workplace as well?
Yeah.
You're right, we work at a Christian organisation. It'd be quite weird if we didn't talk about our faith. But maybe you are in one where it's felt uncomfortable to talk about your faith in the past. You're a bit nervous about doing that. I have been in the past as well. But I see this as a really encouraging moment in the cultural landscape where it's becoming more and more acceptable to talk about that. People are searching for something to grab hold of to give them hope, and I think we have that opportunity to share hope of Jesus Christ.
Right, we're coming back to our trivia section, Joe.
Yes.
Are you excited?
Less excited than I was before.
Oh gosh, why?
Well, I think
because you know the question.
I know the question now.
Okay.
I'll give it a go.
Okay. So I'll read the question out again. Which big man up top played for Bournemouth, Burnley and Stoke, amongst others, and has scored 11 goals for his country, one of them in a Euros quarter-final?
Yeah.
Run me through your thinking.
Well, I initially said Wales, didn't I?
You did.
I felt like Wales would have a big striker that's played for those clubs. But I'm wondering if I need to play this with a bit more of a straight bat.
Okay.
Whether I'm thinking too hard about this around the, is it just Peter Crouch?
Is it just Peter Crouch?
He's the classic big man up top. He's scored a few goals for England, been to a few major tournaments, definitely played for Stoke, definitely played for Burnley, probably played for Bournemouth, played for a host of other clubs. I think it's Peter Crouch, and I'd like to lock that in,
You'd like
please.
to lock in
Yes.
Peter Crouch, okay. Well, I'd love to find out all about the Book of Peter.
Is there not a Book of Peter?
I don't know.
Peter, John, Jude, Revelation.
Is there a Book of Peter?
There is in the New Testament.
Is there?
Yes.
Where's that?
The New Testament, just before John.
Oh, hang on.
Before John 1, John 2,
It's
John
1
3.
Peter. We course. We can take this back.
No, we cannot. We are leaving this in. No, Anthony, Anthony, listen here right now. We are leaving that in because I have just proved Ed wrong.
You've just
on the Bible.
Yeah, we can leave that in. That's fine.
I presume this means I'm incorrect then.
You are incorrect, Joe. It is
That
not.
is a shame.
It is not Peter Crouch. And you know what is horrible is...
Was it John Hartson?
It wasn't John Hartson, but you were really along the right lines.
Wales.
It was a Welshman.
A Welsh striker.
Who scored in the biggest night in Wales's history.
Belgium.
3-1 against Belgium.
Hal Robson-Carney scored.
Yeah, and who scored the third goal?
Oh, gosh.
It was Sam Vokes.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, Sam
That is
Vokes.
hard. That is very hard.
Yeah, played for Bournemouth, Burnley, Stoke.
Sam Vokes. No one's thought about Sam Vokes for years.
He was
Everyone forgot about him the day after he scored that goal.
Oh, I completely disagree.
Did he do well at Stoke?
Fine, I'd say. Yeah, he did all right. He looked really good in some games and a bit off it in others.
That's a real shame. I feel like, going back to my previous point, I think you've made that question really hard, and I think it's quite spiteful of you. And I think
I thought you'd get that. You're so livid with me. Sam Vokes was the correct answer, so I'm afraid it's still 4-2, Joe.
Well, that's a real shame, and I think you need to have a long, hard look at yourself on the way you ask your questions. And just expect next week's question to be absolutely impossible. Thank you for listening to the Big Man Up Top. And if you want to get in touch with the show, please ping us an email to podcasts@ucb.co.uk. Please follow, subscribe, and give us some good reviews, because this will help us get the word out about the podcast. And also, if you've enjoyed it, please tell your mates. Also, a huge thank you to our producer Anthony Salamat-Webb for all his hard work behind the scenes, and for also not taking out that bit where I proved Ed wrong about the Bible. There will be a new episode next Tuesday.
Or there will be, if you forgive me for giving you that question.
I will.
See you next week, Joe.
See you next week.